when I get to know a professor, I get to know their history, because I approach everything from a historical background, that I have a connection. And I learn more and I do harder work when I don't want to let somebody down that I have a connection with. And that has actually been told to me by some of my own students. I think the connection there, the human connection, helps students work harder.
Welcome to the Continuing Studies podcast. I'm Jennifer Lee, founder of JPod Creations.
And I'm Neil McFedrin, founder of Podium Podcast Company and Higher Ed Pods. We are here live on video at Higher Ed PodCon. This is super exciting.
It's like we're in this beautiful venue.
Yeah, this podcast studio is amazing. So they've built this thing here on the campus of Cuyahoga College, which is hosting us for Higher Ed PodCon. And we just have to take advantage of this amazing studio and to finally get on video. So if you've been listening to us for 3 years, this is what we look like.
This is, guys, people don't know what we look like. Big shout out to Josh because he runs the room for us.
Yeah,
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. We sat through an awesome session this morning called Podcasting as Pedagogy. And I just thought we got to get one of these hosts who put on this presentation on the show. And so today we have Rudy Salo, and he's going to talk to us about his podcast and how they actually use their podcast as part of their syllabus and part of their teaching in each of their separate classrooms.
And we learn what pedagogy means as well.
We sure do.
Let's get started.
Let's get into it. Thanks for joining us today, Rudy. It's good to have you here on the Continuing Studies podcast.
Thanks for asking me. I'm honored to be here.
Wonderful. Rudy, you are half of the Good is in the Details podcast. What is your podcast about?
I am the co-host of Good is in the Details. The primary host and the creator is my partner, Gwendolyn Dolsky, who's not here right now. But our podcast is a philosophy podcast. And it was interesting today, somebody asked me, she goes, oh, so on your podcast, you guys just talk about philosophy? I said, no, let me explain what we talk about on our podcast. We're a philosophy podcast, but we talk about everything. Eyebrows raised. And then I said, look, basically what we advocate is how you approach life, how you approach a subject, how you approach something from like film, pop culture, politics, love. There's some kind of a historical or even current philosophical teaching that can help you get through that. Like when you're thinking through a problem or you're trying to approach something that you're not aware of, like use philosophy in order to attack that problem. And what we're primarily focusing on today in the age of AI is critical thinking. When we talk about critical thinking, it's here is a topic, how to analyze a film, how to analyze a news event, how to analyze misinformation. How do you look at that through a philosophical lens and critically think about it? What we advocate always is never just take one side of a story. Always take both sides. Always listen to somebody that you would never listen to hear their side of the story, so then you could come to a conclusion that is more grounded and less subjective and more objective, which is a philosophical approach to life. And that could be applied to everything.
And I love what she said, because obviously philosophy inspired your podcast. And she was saying that Socrates back in the day would go and have conversations with many different people, and creating a dialogue is what you guys do on your podcast.
That's exactly right. And today, not to get political in any way, shape, or form, but everybody's saying we're not dialoguing enough. Right? We're not dialoguing with this side. We're not dialoguing with Canada very well. But it's like, okay, well, how do I go talk to the other side? How could I do that? Like, how could I go do something like that? We teach the tools to do that. On our latest episode, which is entitled, Are You Living in an Echo Chamber? Right? Are you only listening to your side of the story? Right? How can you become better at hearing other sides of the story so you can engage in dialogue with your family? One of the subjects that came up during that podcast episode was there were a lot of articles that came out around Thanksgiving about how difficult it was going to be for families to even attend Thanksgiving because they were worried about getting into fights with other family members. We brought up some examples and we tried to where is some middle ground where you could find something to agree on and talk about with your family. I was joking with you earlier about, I work in transportation finance. I'm an advocate of public transportation. Look, there's one thing in the world everybody hates. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what you live. I don't care what your sex is. I don't care what your religion is. Everybody hates traffic.
Yeah.
Right? So like maybe if you're worried about a very difficult discussion with somebody or family member or anything, like, why don't you talk about how much traffic sucks, get on the same level, and then, that kind of level sets. It's very simplistic, but like it's a different way of trying to change your own mindset when you're about to enter into difficult conversations or dialogue.
Yeah, and that's the hard part right now, because I know even last year, a lot of people were saying they are stopping attending family events because of politics, because right now people are so politically divided. And so it's like, how do you avoid bringing it up while you're carving the turkey?
Yeah, you're carving the turkey. Don't insult the turkey. Please don't hurt anybody's feelings with insulting the cooking in any way, shape, or form, because that's a whole other set of problems. But we really are trying on our show to bring multiple people from multiple sides of the political spectrum in order to show that everybody can dialogue. Like, we ensure that nobody could just paint us as, oh, you guys are just some blank wing podcast, and you're only going to have blank wing people on there. I'm not going to listen to that show. What am I going to get out of that show? We bring everybody to have a dialogue because we are concerned about the future of our country, the future of dialogue, family relationships, work relationships. And that's one of the reasons we do the show the way we do the show.
The problem is that a lot of people can't dialogue with each other. It's always one-sided, and a lot of people don't want to listen to the other side.
And that's where critical thinking helps. Because if you can try to see where the other side comes from by reading that newspaper or watching that news program, shut down your own biases and listen, you might be able to better engage in the dialogue and bring up some things to that individual that they never thought of. And that can enhance dialogue and conversation. And truly, like, what's the point of philosophy? What's the point of our show? What do we advocate? Curiosity, right? We truly believe that happiness is not a Porsche. It's not the mega mansion. It's not all the BS that you see on Instagram and TikTok about how people are living lives. Happiness comes from engaging and satiating curiosity, like getting questions answered, knowledge. So long as you know that you don't know everything. That was Socrates' tale that you were bringing up earlier. Socrates was the wisest man because he knew that he did not know everything. And if you know that, that's humility. And if you have humility, that's going to take you a long way in life. And that's one of the major tenets of our show.
We're actually here at Higher Ed PodCon, and now you and Gwen just gave a presentation this morning, podcasting as pedagogy. So,
yeah, I can't even pronounce it. I pronounced it in a way. She said, whatever you do not pronounce it that way because everyone's going to be really weirded out. But yes, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
I was like, Gwen, what does that word mean? She goes, oh, it's teaching tool. I'm like, you didn't want to just say teaching tool? She goes, no, it just sounds cooler. So yes, I'm very, higher ed-y of her, but yes.
Okay, so and Gwen is a philosophy professor, and you are a law professor. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you use this podcast in each of your different teaching scenarios.
Yeah, that's a really great question because the genesis of Good is in the Details came from that. Gwen wanted a deeper connection with her students. She was a fan already of podcasts, and she knew that it was a teaching tool. And she also knew that podcasts in and of themselves are a part of this thousands of years of traditions of dialogues. And so she thought, why would I not record the author of this great book that I'm teaching in class on an episode that many students can learn from in the future? That was kind of the genesis of it. If I'm going to have experts on and I'm going to have a conversation with them, it'd be truly wonderful to record it and use it as a teaching tool. That was basically the tenet of the show. I wasn't on the show originally. I speak frequently about public transportation. She came to one of my talks and she said, hey, would you like to come on the show and talk about your philosophy of transportation and, the history of LA infrastructure? I said, absolutely, I will, because I approach transportation and how to commute with a philosophical lens. And that's how my philosophy is: better to let somebody else do the driving, right? If there's a way for you to get from point A to point B, even if it's a little bit longer, but if you're able to read a book or study that language or write that novel that you always wanted to, right? Instead of sitting around and complaining that you don't have the time to do something, we all have 24 hours in the day. Figure out how to better organize your life to get more time in your day, right? So I was pre-COVID, I got 2.5 hours back of my day every day by using public transportation. That's how I was able to achieve the other things that I was able to achieve. So that was my philosophy. So she brought me on, she interviewed me. And then after that, she said, hey, look, this is really cool. Like you're already on a number of these transportation podcasts. I did some acting podcasts. Would you like to be a co-host on the show? I'm planning on using this as a part of my syllabus. I said, absolutely. And that actually sparked the idea in my own brain, because I do teach a law class. I teach how to be a deal lawyer or contracts 2.0. And I was thinking of ways I could implement some of the things we were talking about on our show into my own teaching, because my classes are 2 hours and 45 minutes long. No matter how much material they can give me, it's very difficult to teach contracts for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I'm like, I got to make this more engaging. So I've implemented audio into my own classroom. I've implemented TED Talks. I've implemented some of our episodes, and I've used some of our episodes as teaching tools for those important instances where I need the students to make a judgment call. So I'm providing them with more materials to make better judgments, to think of things in a different way. And I've also used our podcast episodes to have the students get to know me a little bit better. I have them know that, like, I was struggling when I was in law school, right? I absolutely 100%. I was there. Listen to this episode about what is cognitive behavioral therapy. I give the entire background of what I went through in law school. And I try to introduce that episode early on. And I feel like the barrier between them and me is gone. The personal conversations that I've had with students has improved as a result of me implementing these episodes into my teaching.
We talked about this a little bit in the lobby. What you're doing with your hours in the classroom, so your 2 hours and 45 minutes, is you're curating a really thoughtful lesson plan, opposed to like other people would probably be like, 2 hours and 45 minutes, I'll just stick a law video on or whatever. And then like, you're not getting that quality. It's the same thing with podcasting, where it's like you really want to structure your episode properly as well. Because again, you don't want to, and a lot of people are guilty of this, is they'll go in and be like, I'm going to talk about this.
Yep.
And they're like, I'm just going to blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And you're not getting anything from it. So I think what you do with your podcast and what you do in your classroom is really thoughtful.
It is. And even more to your point, yes, of course we prepare for every single guest. I don't know how she does it, but Gwen reads every book of every person that comes onto our show. I do my very best to read as much as possible of my guest books. But just with my normal day job, I'm a partner at an international, very large law firm. Like, I'm not able to read everything. So we have prepared talking points, but we don't have, well, here's question one, and that's going to lead to question two, and you're going to say this, you're going to do that. There's supposed to, this is a conversation. Mm-hmm. There's got to be dialogue. That's going to be boring. If you just ask a question, you get an answer, there's no dialogue, right? So oftentimes on the show, like in a normal conversation, I will jump in, yes, I'll interrupt a guest while they're talking, not rudely, but I'll be like, oh, wait, hold on, wait a minute. What you just said, sticking on that point, well, what about this or what about that? And we like to see how it goes, because that's how a conversation is. And that's how we do our show. I hope that others do that. And maybe there's some people out there that are not comfortable with that. If you're coming on to our show, be prepared to dialogue, be prepared to have a conversation, because it's going to be a conversation.
I want to come back to something you were talking about, and Gwen talked about it earlier today in your talk. And it struck me because using your podcast as part of the syllabus, and let's dig into that in a second, but part of what struck me was she said it also helps her students look at her, and you were sort of saying something similar, as humans. And it created a different relationship. And I hadn't thought about that. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I am still a lifelong student. I still take classes online or through extension programs like UCLA. Whenever you enter into a classroom, the teacher is up there and you are down here. You don't know that person, right? You're trusting that the university has done their background and they're hiring somebody who knows their stuff, right? Not always the case. But I do feel that when I get to know a professor, I get to know their history, because I approach everything from a historical background, that I have a connection. And I learn more and I do harder work when I don't want to let somebody down that I have a connection with. And that has actually been told to me by some of my own students. They have said, you're tough, you're old school. Nobody talks like you talk this way. Everyone's coddling us and telling us everything is going to be fine. A lot of it we think is BS. You're actually giving us points from your life and where your struggles and the thing that you're going through to better prepare us. You are tough. And this is the hardest I've ever worked in a class, but I don't want to let you down. I think the connection there, the human connection, helps students work harder, the ones that want to work harder.
You think because they listen to your podcast, it takes them out of this classroom scenario to a certain extent, and it reframes you almost and your relationship with them, and therefore it creates a different connection point, which carries over into the teaching and that yearning for them to do even better with you as their professor.
Yes, but it doesn't stop there. Some of my relationships with my students, a lot of them reach out and say, hey, professor, I got to talk about this job situation. You kept harping on unhappy lawyers and how there's a big substance abuse problem in the law, and you don't want us to go down that road. We need to talk because I'm really unhappy. And it's not just for the classroom, it's for life. Like because in the law, yes, there's tons of lawyers, for sure. There's too many of them. We'll see if AI takes care of that. But it is a referral business. Your name goes a long way, especially in markets like Southern California. And I know that these students are someday, I might be working for them. And so to have that connection with them beyond the classroom is vitally important for me as an individual, as well as for my own business networking. And what if they work at a governmental agency? A lot of things in the law can be solved with picking up the phone and asking a question. I know that sounds crazy because...
But nobody picks up the phone anymore, so...
Well, they do if they have a connection with you. And that's extremely important. They feel more connected with me as their professor, but also as a human. And they know that they could come to me for life advice and career advice going forward, which is the reason why I teach.
Can we circle back on actually, how do you use these podcast episodes in your syllabus? It's interesting because your law and your co-host is philosophy, but curious, maybe you can give us examples of both on Gwen's behalf as well.
Gwen gave a couple examples today where there'll be a topic, and she teaches a number of different courses. She doesn't just teach like Philosophy 101, right? She teaches a class about philosophy of sex and love. And there's a lot of gender issues in that course, right? So she gave the example today about one of our favorite guests, Darlia Schweitzer. She's been on 4 times, who is a professor in her own right, the professor of film and film studies. And Darlia had put out a book called LA Private Eyes, which is basically a book about film noir and the detective. But it's not like a history book about film noir. It's like a philosophical, sociological look about like, what is the detective and who isn't a detective? And she brought up the point about what's the role of the female in these stories, right? Femme fatale, usually the negative. You don't see a lot of female detectives. There's 1 or 2 in history, but why? Why does the female have this role as a part of the story? And she incorporates our episode into that discussion on her philosophy of sex and love. We talk about the female, we talk about the femme fatale, and she has said that has led to multiple students getting more interested in the detective story, getting more interested in the role of the female in film noir. The example that I gave during our discussion today was in my course, Brutal. It's got a 3.0 grading curve, which is very hard for law school, meaning even if everybody earns an A, it doesn't matter. I have to give some C's. I have to give some B minuses. Right. There's only a couple of A's. There's one transaction. It's transaction 3. It's the employment contract one, where that's the make or break. Doesn't matter if you've gotten 100%. If you choose wrong based upon all the ways we've set you up to choose wrong, you're going to get a terrible grade. I found that the materials that we're providing just weren't enough because the topic is so complicated. So we did an episode about the gig economy and the explosion of the gig economy during COVID, because like I said, everybody and their mother had a gig job. And we analyzed the gig job, but we also analyzed what the differences between an employee and independent contractor are, and what does it mean to be an employee as opposed to an independent contractor. I have implemented that as a part of the syllabus. I put that in there for the students to listen to So they have a better understanding of what they should be choosing correctly. And I've noticed that as a result, less and less of the students are choosing the wrong setup because we set them up to kind of fail. And I've also noticed that the ones that didn't listen to the additional materials that I provide are continuing to fail. And the students used to be very angry about the hide the ball nature of things. So I've implemented this episode and those additional materials almost to like protect me, to be like, please stop giving me bad reviews over something that the university told me to give onto you. Like, I gave you even more materials. You chose not to.
You led them right to water.
I basically led them right to water.
You gave them a boat too.
Yeah. And that anger from the students has also dissipated as well.
So that's how I didn't listen to the episode, I guess. So there you go. So did you create that episode to solve that problem, or did you have the episode and went, oh, this is a great way to solve the problem? Like, and both of you, do you approach it that way? Like, you're planning out an episode for the syllabus?
No, we let it happen organically.
I like that.
Because we learn after the fact, because we both listen to the episodes several times, and then we figure out where to plug them in. We recently just recorded an episode. That was one where I did go into it with the intent that I wanted my students to listen to this, and I'm going to incorporate this very early on into my syllabus when I get it next year. And that is Unhappy Lawyers, Hope for Unhappy Lawyers, or I've forgotten the name of the title. But we had a pretty well-known expert. If you're in the law, you know who this dude is, because he helps a lot of lawyers get out of the law. We had a very frank discussion about lawyer happiness and how to approach the law and how to think about it. So that one is one where I did record with thinking of it for my students. But in general, no, we usually think of after the fact. We're like, oh yeah, we can use this now here. Or, I think Gwen is thinking always of maybe pitching some more courses to her university. And, this kind of collection of these episodes could very well just turn into, oh my gosh, like now we have, like, for example, this is a crazy example. We have about 7 or 8 episodes on the why of true crime. Not true crime, the why of true crime. We've gotten podcast hosts from numerous true crime podcasts, and we asked them, why did you do this? What was your reasoning to do this? And then we got into the analysis of why true crime is so popular. And what does that say about our society? So we try to approach it from a philosophical lens. Like, why is it so popular with women? Why is it that, and like that, I think it's a great course. My fascination with true crime as well as horror films, stemmed from something that I went through when I was a kid. Growing up in LA, and I talk a lot about that. I talk about it a lot because I think it's something that's not talked about enough, is when you go through some kind of childhood trauma, true crime and horror films helps you deal with that PTSD because you can press pause, you have control. If you're watching a scary movie and you're feeling those feelings that you had felt when you were vulnerable, you have some control there. And so I talk about how I use horror films to kind of help me with undiagnosed childhood PTSD when I was 8 years old, and the Night Stalker was running around Los Angeles, and I didn't sleep for a summer. And my dad slept on a couch with a gun on his chest for an entire summer. And it's, just thinking about it drives me a little crazy. I never really got into why I like true crime and horror until I started analyzing that. Maybe that'll help people deal with some of their issues with that. So I don't know. That's an idea of a potential course that could be generated from our podcast.
One fun question before we head here, because I feel like Neil and I could talk to you forever. You talked about analyzing movies and different characters. What are your opinions of how lawyers are portrayed in movies and TV series?
It's a great question. The way lawyers are depicted, and perhaps maybe this was the 70s and 80s, actually leads to a lot of people going to law school that should not. A lot of people go to law school because they see the trial out there. They think you're going to go to court. They think you're going to be Tom Cruise saying, "I want the truth." The chances of you even getting in the courtroom are very, 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 very low. So the way I think about how the law is expressed in TV and film shows is that it's incorrect. It does not show the true grind of the law. And everybody says, oh, you should watch Suits, or oh, you should watch this, or oh, you should watch that. I was like, look, like I watched a whole bunch of legal stuff when I was a kid. And sure, that had some kind of impact on me as to why I went into the law. That is not how you practice law. What I have told people, and there's a lot of people scratch their head and are like, that dude's shady. I'm like, okay, you want to know? You want to know real? You want to know what it's really like to practice law? You want to know the most accurate, the 100% most? I know for a fact there were law firm lawyers in that writing room, writing the TV show, and they go, yeah. I go, Better Call Saul, and they go, what? They go, you mean all lawyers are shady? All lawyers are criminal? I go, no. See, you're missing the point. You didn't see the nuances of what Saul had to go through when he worked at that law firm, when he was just this peon, and he had this brother who was this big swinger, and the relationships of the other lawyers, and the relationships of business, and how you get a client, and how do you steal a client, and how do you steal a client back, and in marketing your name and everything like that. I said, Better Call Saul is the most accurate show because it shows the pain of practicing law. I've seen some things.
Oh, wow. I think we end there. You've seen some things, even though I want to know what they are. But,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Neil and I have really enjoyed this.
For sure. Thanks, Rudy. This is great. Great to hear about how you are using your podcast in the classroom.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Jen, here we are. We're back in our home studios, back from PodCon. That's why there's a little bit of a disconnect there from the rest of the video, because we're back in our home studios. Still in the afterglow of PodCon. That was awesome. And this conversation here with Rudy was excellent.
We learned so much, and I loved asking him about how he thinks lawyers are portrayed in television and film. So I thought his answer was really great to that.
Yeah, that was good. A classic Jen going off of our prescribed questions, but I love it. That's what we talked about in this episode, so that was great. My big takeaway or thing that I hadn't thought about before was just how a podcast actually sort of changes the relationship between the professor and the student, and just sort of gives a different dynamic to it, and the benefits about that. So definitely going to think about that as we move forward.
You and I are going to have some dialogue about what you just said about me going off script, so we can make better choices when we're interviewing people in our next episode. So thank you so much for tuning into the Continuing Studies podcast, a podcast for higher education podcasters. We hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, we encourage you to follow and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform, so you'll never miss an episode. But if you found this episode particularly valuable, please consider sharing it with your friends and colleagues who also might be interested in higher education podcasts. We also invite you to join your peers on higheredpods.com, where you can connect with other podcasters in higher education and learn from others in the field. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to continuing to bring you valuable insights and conversations around higher education podcasts. See you in the next episode.